Voces, the power of speaking, the courage to listen. Hi there. My name is Maria Paz Miranda Gonzalez. I'm a teacher, a photographer, and someone who believes deeply in communication, participation, and community. I live in Pichilemu, a small coastal town in central Chile. Welcome to the first edition of Voces. In English, that means voices. So, what is Voces? It's a community publication. It brings together stories, reflections, art, and personal experiences from people in this territory. It is a space to talk about participation, community, women, art, and well being. A space to say out loud what we carry as a community. Voces is part of a larger communication project, one that believes in the power of local voices and active listening. This first edition was launched for International Women's Day back in March 2026 under the title Taking the Floor. I invited women from different backgrounds to share their voices. Some wrote, others helped by reading the original Spanish audio version. Now, before we begin, I want to share something personal. This is the first time I have recorded voices in English. I'm also an English and Spanish teacher, and I know this. We learn by doing. We grow when we dare to try. So, if you're waiting until you feel ready, I hope this encourages you to begin anyway. Will I make mistakes today? Probably, and that it's okay. So, here we go. And one more thing before we start. I'm already working on the second edition of Voces. I'm so excited about what's coming. Each author in the editions of Voces is responsible for their own words and opinions. You can listen to the original Spanish audio version and read it too. I've left the links below. If you would like to support this project, leave a comment, subscribe, and follow us. You can also find me on Instagram at Maria Paz Visual or write us to mariapazvisual@gmail.com. Thank you for listening and thank you for being part of Voces. To open this edition, I invited textile artist Vicky Acosta Messias to write a personal reflection on the meaning of March 8th. Her work explores memory, identity, and stories into everyday life, making her voice a meaningful place to begin this conversation. Next, we share Ways of Seeing That Resist by Vicky Acosta Messias. In the original Spanish audio version, this piece was read by my grandmother, Juana Rios Reyes. March 8th, International Women's Day, was not born from celebration, it was born from struggle. Its origins lie in a series of historical events in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when women around the world began organizing to demand labor, social, and political rights. From where I stand, this is not a day to celebrate. It's a day to commemorate, to reflect, and to honor the work of women as well as our right to participate fully and autonomously in society. Since I was very young, this date has been part of my own story. Today, my voice takes shape through drawings, watercolors, embroidery, and arpilleras. Through these works, I do not portray famous women or celebrated figures. Instead, I seek to honor those the system has rendered invisible, women whose work sustains everyday life, yet whose contributions so often go unseen and unrecognized. These are ways of seeing that resist. One of the stories in our first edition comes from a collective that was deeply meaningful to many of us in Pichilemu. I invited Paula Aya Lopez to write about Mujeres Libres Pichilemu, a grassroots collective of which I was also a part. For several years, it became an important community space in Pichilemu, bringing together women through shared experiences, mutual support, and collective organizing. Here is the Matrix of Change, Listening and Standing Alongside. In the original Spanish audio version, this piece was read by Marcela Lizana Pais. At first, we called ourselves a collective. Over time, we realized that what was emerging was something much bigger, a self organized space of care, a place without political labels or identity requirements, where what mattered wasn't how someone defined herself, but simply that she could come and feel supported. In Pichilemu, women and people from many different backgrounds began finding one another. They were living through difficult situations: domestic violence, abuse, harassment, and isolation. Many had no close support network, and in a small town, that absence is felt even more deeply. In places where formal support systems often fall short, we began meeting out of necessity. It wasn't a project with major funding or a structured organization. It wasn't a project with major funding or a structured organization. It was something simpler and more urgent. We knew we could no longer face these realities alone. Among us were people with different experiences and backgrounds in psychology, social work, and community care. But what truly held us together was something much simpler: a willingness to listen, to offer guidance, and never to judge. We heard difficult stories. Some required immediate support, others had been kept in silence for years. We came to understand that before any solution, the first thing a person needs is to not feel alone. We also learned something important. We didn't all use the same language or define ourselves in the same way. Far from dividing us, those differences made us stronger because the focus was never the label, the focus was care. Over time, we came to understand something that is often lived in silence in small towns. Violence isn't always visible, but it's always there. And when there are no clear support networks, it becomes even harder to see. The experience taught us something else as well. Community care doesn't replace the state, but it can become essential when institutional responses are delayed or simply aren't enough. Autonomous networks aren't an abstract idea, they are something we already build together. This experience showed us that our strength was never in individual names or individual leaders. It was in the network itself, in the trust we built, in our decision to support one another. What remains isn't only an experience, but a lesson. In communities like ours, shared care isn't a luxury or slogan, it's a real necessity. And we know that when we choose to organize around care, the network exists because we already lived it. Knowing who sustains our local organizations help us understand how our community and local democracy are built. The data we will hear next invite us to look more closely at the role many women play in this process. Here is Women Leaders Sustaining Our Community, written by Vilma Leiva Huanca, and in the original Spanish version, it was read by Gloria Cortés Reyes. In Pichilemu, the data shows us a clear reality. In our local organizations, 55% of the presidents are women, and in 90% of these leadership teams, there is at least one woman in charge. These women lead our neighborhood councils, sports clubs, cultural groups, and housing committees. This is not a small detail. It shows that the real work of our organizations is done by women through their management, their coordination, and their decision making. However, leading doesn't always mean having equal power. A national study called Women Who Sustain shows that 72% of women in leadership roles feel overloaded with work, and 81% say they take on extra responsibilities that aren't even part of their official job. In short, female leadership often comes with an extra burden, one that is often invisible and taken for granted. In our town, this matches what is happening across the country. Women don't just participate, they organize, manage resources, solve conflicts, and guide our community. But they do this while juggling their paid jobs and the care and domestic work at home. Giving voice to this data for International Women's Day is not just a symbol. It is a way to recognize that local democracy is held up by the hard work, often unpaid, of these women. Moving toward equality means sharing the power, the decisions, and the workload. Recognizing this is not just a gesture, it is a necessary step towards a community that is more fair and shares responsibilities equally. For this edition, I invited Paloma Cale Miranda, a member of Casa Arcoiris, to write about a subject that is deeply connected to her work and lived experiences: care. Through this reflection, Paloma brings an important perspective to a conversation that touches many lives. Here is To a Culture of Shared Care, written by Paloma Cale Miranda. In the original Spanish audio, this piece was read by Karen Diaz Montesinos. There is an invisible care and a silent struggle carried by caregivers. Throughout history, we have made progress in human and social rights, but a structural debt remains: social justice for those of us who care. Our society continues to normalize the extreme effort of women caregivers, especially those with children living with disabilities. In daily life, many caregivers live a level of stress comparable to that of a soldier in combat, a constant alert, managing complex situations and unexpected crises, while coordinating therapies, supports, and treatments for their loved ones. It is a permanent demand that offers no rest. On top of this comes economic pressure. The cost of therapies, transportation, and specialized support force families to stretch their budgets and often require the mother to reduce or leave her paid work altogether. In this way, care becomes a 24/7 responsibility that impacts the emotional and physical health of the caregiver, strains economic stability, and compresses family time, especially when support networks are scarce or non existent. The lack of time and the constant exhaustion create barriers for caregivers, limiting our participation in social life and shrinking our personal space. In the world of disability, obstacles are both physical and social. When our loved ones show signs of dysregulation, sometimes labeled as disruptive or escapist behavior, families face misunderstanding and stigma. This leads to isolation and restricts even the most ordinary activities, going for a walk, attending schools. Despite these challenges, hope in a more just and conscious future sustains us as caregivers. Making care visible, building awareness of its importance is essential. Although there is now a new caregiving law and support programs, care is still understood socially as the exclusive responsibility of the mother. This must change. It is a profound social injustice and a form of violence. We, caregivers, are constantly judged and overdemanded. In many cases, we are deprived of sleep, personal care, of professional development, and of a satisfying social life. It is time to recognize and value our work and to demand real support from the state and from society. Together, we can build a future where care is a shared responsibility. Mental health is also an essential part of the conversation when we talk about women rights in our community. This next piece offers a compassionate look at trauma, survival, and the personal process of healing without turning away from our own history. This is Mind, Health, Heart, and Reality by psychologist Gaby Esperanza, read in our original audio by Soledad Guerrero Urrea. Women, rights, rural life, economics, education, care, fathers, mothers, children, work. And after all of that and more, how are we doing mentally? Holding others up, keeping things together, holding ourselves together, being broken and still fighting. Living in a country where emotions are not a priority, where physical pain is taken seriously, but emotional pain is simply ignored. We are part of a culture that has historically mistreated children and turned the social role of being a woman into a burden. So, it is no surprise that when we listen to the stories of many of us, we find right violations that go back a long way. In childhood, neglect by the adults who were supposed to take care of us, physical and psychological abuse, harassment on the streets, sexual abuse, and in adulthood, street violence, violence in relationships, family conflict tied to caregiving roles. Being a psychologist in this community opens many hearts to me. I have been able to listen to and sit with many wounds, I have walked alongside people and offered myself in service of that desire to heal. And it hurts. It hurts that we have been convinced that healing works like fixing a broken toy, as though the ways we learn to cope, the strength we build to survive in hostile environments where effective toys get thrown away. So many damaged women live with the fear of being discarded. But what are those ways of coping really? What does healing actually mean? How do I work through the emotional weight of my pain on my trauma? The armor we put on to stay sane while surviving. Today it feels heavy, and to the world it seems like a problem. But let us give value to what helped us survive. Not romanticize it, but not deny or minimize it either. We don't have to be grateful for the harm that was done to us, and we don't have to force ourselves to forgive the person who caused it. What we can do is learn to make peace with our own story because it's personal. No one gets to tell me how someone else made me feel. I may go my whole life without forgiving, but I cannot go my whole life holding myself responsible for what someone else did. No one chooses to be a victim. And once I recognize that I was in that place, I can begin to take back my story and my life. I can set boundary. I can begin to take back my story and my life. I can set boundaries and decide who gets to be close to me. When someone has been through serious trauma, they cannot expect to return to the life they had before or to live the way others seem to. We have to accept that what happened is part of our story and it did not kill us, but that it changed us and it will keep changing the way we move through the world. We will need to learn to manage our fears and our defenses because when they flare up, the world decides something is wrong with us. It doesn't see the achievement of having survived, it only sees the marks left behind. Let us not play along with a society obsessed with success that tells us that anger, suffering, or returning to a painful memory is an inconvenience. Pain is not an obstacle, it is a normal response from a system that was trying to protect us. We are not less worthy for being triggered, for feeling things deeply, or for coming back sometimes to what still needs to feel understood, held, and cared for. The last piece in this edition is the editorial I wrote for Voces. For the Spanish audio version, I asked Sonia Flores Soto to read these words. Here is the first editorial. I want to close this first edition of Voces with a simple but important idea. Communicating is not only speaking, it is also about listening. That sounds like something we do every day, but when we see families sitting together, each person looking at their own screen, it is worth asking what is happening to the way we connect? And how are we relating to each other in a time where everything moves so fast? For many women, finding our voice has not been easy. For years, we were taught to stay quiet, to not cause trouble, to keep our experiences in the private sphere. That is why sharing what we live through at home, at work, in the countryside, or in the city carries real meaning. Saying it out loud, it's breaking silences that have long sustained gender, economic, and territorial inequalities. We don't all live the same lives. Being a rural woman is not the same as living in the city. Being a migrant, a caregiver, or having access to education shapes a different path. Our experiences are marked by different realities that overlap and intersect. Recognizing that matters, not to compare ourselves, but to understand that inequality does not reach all of us in the same way. Listening is also a conscious choice. It means making space for other stories without assuming that one single view explains everything. It means recognizing that knowledge is not only found in books and institutions, it lives in our communities, in everyday experience, and in the wisdom of our grandmothers. To listen from that place is to value our roots and our own ways of seeing the world. This International Women's Day, this publication wants to be a space to speak and to listen, to meet each other in our differences, but also in what we share. We are countryside and city, memory and present, pain and hope. When we dare to speak and to listen to one another, that diversity becomes a collective strength. Thank you for reading and thank you for listening. This first edition was dedicated to my grandmothers, Juana Rosa Ríos Reyes and Eloísa del Carmen Sepúlveda Briones. The final section was called Art That Speaks. In this edition, we were joined by guest artist Cata Conejo, an arts worker, actress, and embroiderer. Cata shared pieces that you can find in our digital newsletter. She also shared an audio performance called Women Who Cook Revolution. It is inspired by Elena Garro's play The Dogs, and it reflects on how society makes violence against women seem normal. We have reached the end of our first edition of Voces in English. Listening is also a way to participate. By opening space for these words and these stories, you help this conversation come to life. Thank you for listening. I'm already working on the second edition, and I'm so excited about where this project is going. I hope to keep building these spaces for community participation and shared voices. I hope these words reach you. If you would like to keep listening Voices in English, let me know in the comments. Your response matters. You can follow me on Instagram, Maria Paz Visual. Thank you for being part of Voices.